You've asked a question that lots of people are trying to figure out right now, particularly in the run-up to the important UN climate negotiations, COP26 in Glasgow. Climate change is what's sometimes described as a wicked problem. That is a problem or an issue that has no one solution, and for which it's really difficult to know which solution or solutions might be best or better ones. But yes, to answer your question, there are definitely more ways than one to deal with climate change. And we really need to do all of these things right now if we're going to really get serious about climate change. So let's look at some options. The first thing, of course, is to change our energy system. We know that climate change has been caused by humans burning fossil fuels and pumping too many greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. And we know we need to simply stop burning fossil fuels. We also know of possible alternative ways to replace our energy from fossil fuels. So that is by scaling up renewables like solar and wind and existing hydroelectricity. We can also develop new fuels like hydrogen. The same goes for our transport system. We'll need to electrify everything, electric cars and buses and much more public transport. Cars that run on hydrogen are also being developed, and instead of toxic exhaust, they emit just water vapor. But we also need to understand that any new infrastructure we develop to help mitigate climate change will also have impacts on the planet. Wind turbines need huge amounts of steel and copper, solar panels need rare earth minerals, and car batteries need lithium. Mining all of these things from the earth will cause huge additional impacts on the planet and destruction of ecosystems. So what else can we do? Well, we need a truly circular economy. That means that everything we make gets recycled and its raw materials are reused at the end of its life cycle. We also need to consume less. People in rich countries who've benefited for much longer from burning fossil fuels really need to cut down and consume less of everything. One way we could do this is cutting down on eating meat and animal products. Nearly 15% of global emissions comes from meat production, and Australians are one of the highest per capita meat consumers. To help fight climate change, we also need to restore nature. Trees and natural ecosystems take up and store lots of carbon. This can happen in the water and on land. Natural climate solutions, that is conservation and restoration and rewilding of land in order to increase carbon storage, could provide up to 37% of the emission reductions that are needed by 2030 globally. Another thing that's strongly linked to climate change is human population, just how many there are of us on the planet. This is one of the trickiest and most controversial things to deal with in terms of climate change. Luckily, world population predictions do show that after peaking in about 2064 at about 9.7 billion people, human population will fall to about 8.8 billion people by 2100. That's about 2 billion lower than some previous estimates, so that's better news for the planet. Finally, one very thorny potential climate change solution to think about, and that's geoengineering. This could be, for example, creating a sunshade for Earth by what's called stratospheric aerosol injection. So that would mean spraying large quantities of tiny reflective particles into the stratosphere, a layer high up in Earth's atmosphere, in order to cool the planet and to reflect sunlight back out into space. This is a highly controversial and potentially irreversible way of changing our planet, likely with some unknowable effects. Most difficult would be to get an agreement between nations on how this might be done. It's probably a last resort type solution to climate change, and it would be dangerous if it were an excuse for continuing to burn fossil fuels. So in answer to your question, yes, there are many ways and many things we can do to reduce climate change, if not stop it completely. And these are just a few. Thanks for that great question, Princess Street Primary Grade 5-6 Yellow.